Okay, so we'll kick this off. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Effective EPA Brownfield Grant Writing Tips virtual workshop. I'm glad you could join us today. Just get my camera on here. Okay. So my name is Sean Vroom. I'm the director of the Center for the Center of Community Systems here at NJIT. As well as the Technical Assistance to Brownfields program. Before we get started, I first want to thank Sustainable Jersey for hosting today's virtual workshop. Collaborating with entities such as Sustainable Jersey is critical for NJIT TAB to be able to achieve our mission of getting the word out about the free technical resources that we provide to communities that want to learn about, assess, clean up, and redevelop brownfields. So in today's workshop, I'm going to provide an overview of available EPA brownfield grants for the fiscal year 2024. How these grants, I'm going to talk a little bit about how these grants relate to Sustainable Jersey's brownfield actions. I'm going to give you some tips on writing a competitive grant application. I'll talk a little bit about some of the common mistakes that we have seen applicants make over the years, because we've reviewed hundreds of these applications. And I'm also going to provide you with some technical resources available to applicants, which is primarily NJIT TAB, in going through this process of applying if you choose to do so. So again, just to be clear, I'm not going to be going into great detail about each of the brownfield grant application criterion, as EPA just completed yesterday and the day before 2 webinars that did just that. And those webinars were recorded and will be made available on EPA's websites. The links to which I've provided on a slide later in this workshop, but I've also put them in the comments window so you can easily cut and paste them and save them down to your computers. So just a little housekeeping. All the participants are going to be muted throughout the virtual workshop. I'd ask that you please submit all your questions into the Q&A pane, not the comments pane. Just makes it easier for me to locate them. And then during the Q&A portion of the workshop, Samantha McGraw of Sustainable Jersey is going to be joining us to answer any questions you might have about Sustainable Jersey action items. A recording of the workshop's also going to, as well as the presentation, will be made available on our resources page of the NJIT TAB website. We have the URL up on this slide for you to be able to go to. So what I'll do now is turn my camera off just so I'm not distracting anyone while I go through the presentation, and we'll get started. So not knowing everybody's familiarity with what brownfields are, so I'm going to provide you with EPA's definition. Of course, because we're going to be discussing EPA grant funding. So EPA defines a brownfield as a real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, contaminants, controlled substances, petroleum, or petroleum products, or is mine-scarred land. So to kind of simplify the concept for you, we always use this example. If you have a gas station that's functioning as a gas station and one of their underground storage tanks is leaking fuel, you have basically a property that has a contamination issue, but because it's being utilized to, at that point, its full potential as a gas station, it's not considered a brownfield. On the other hand, if you have an old auto repair shop that is now shuttered, it's abandoned, you would think, because of the past use of that site, that there would be some type of contamination on that property. But that may not be the case. There may be no contamination. But being as it is underutilized and there's a suspicion that there may be contamination, that is what we classify as a brownfield. So Sustainable Jersey brownfield action. So Sustainable Jersey, I'm sure you all know, you're all involved and participate in their action items. They basically have a certification program for New Jersey towns that perform various sustainable actions, such as energy efficiency measures, climate change mitigation and planning, or waste management initiatives. So participating towns, basically they earn points for each of the actions that they submit for, and they're certified after reaching a certain point total in meeting, and they have to meet other requirements as well. But that's basically the concept behind it. So they have a series of brownfield actions. There's 4 of them, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what each one of them are, so you can see, as I go through the EPA grants available, you can see how they relate to them. So the first one, first action is their brownfield inventory and prioritization. The inventory component of this action requires that a municipality compile a list of brownfield sites that they obtain through publicly available information and research. The municipality, can earn additional points as well under this action if they develop a prioritized list of brownfields. And to do that, they must have at least identified a minimum of 3 brownfield sites. Then another action is their brownfields reuse planning. The purpose of this action is to proactively support and collaborate in collaborative stakeholder processes and facilitate the identification of proposed reuse options for brownfield sites that enhances livability, prosperity, and equity. Some of the activities that are related to this action include community engagement related to the identification of reuse options, or it can be properly dated planning or marketing documents, both of which would be eligible EPA brownfield grant activities. Brownfields marketing is the third one that they have. The goal of this action is to encourage municipalities to proactively market available brownfield sites to attract investment that leads to redevelopment. So for points under this action, the municipality must compile comprehensive information about the brownfield sites. And then lastly is their brownfield assessment and investigation. And the brownfield assessment and investigation action recognizes municipalities that have taken steps to assess and investigate properties with suspected or actual contamination to position them for remedial action and ultimately for redevelopment. So keep those in mind as we go through these, and I'll relate them over to the EPA grants that are going to be available for this upcoming fiscal year 2024. So this year, for fiscal year 2024, EPA is offering 3 types of brownfields grants. They're going to have their brownfields multipurpose grant, their brownfield assessment grants, and they're going to have the brownfield cleanup grants. So we typically, what we refer to this as a MAC solicitation. If they have the full line, make available the full, all the grants that they have, then they would include the Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund, which is referred to as the RLF, and that would make it a MARC grant solicitation. Sometimes they don't make available the multipurpose grant, and then you'd have an ARC grant solicitation. So it varies from year to year. Typically, EPA alternates the availability of the multipurpose grant with the revolving loan fund grant. So being as this year the RLF is not available, chances are it's going to be available next year, and maybe the multipurpose grant won't be, but that's up to EPA, and I don't have a crystal ball to tell you how they're going to approach this. These grants are available to state, county, local, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofit organizations. So just a little bit more detail about, again, the Brownfields multipurpose grant. Now, again, I'm not going to go into deep detail about all these. All of this is available on EPA's websites and in the webinars that they've already conducted, so I don't want to be too repetitive. But the Brownfields multipurpose grant, essentially under this grant, you can, you're eligible to do site brownfield inventories. You can do brownfield site prioritization. You can do site reuse planning, community involvement activities. You can assess sites. That would be your phase 1 and phase 2s. You can do cleanup planning, and then you can ultimately clean up the brownfield site. So this one does it all. You can get up to $1 million in funding for this application. It's a 5-year performance period. And if you look at the bottom of the slide that I have up, you can see that the eligible sustainable Jersey actions that relate to this grant, or activities that you can conduct with this grant money, that would include your brownfields inventory and prioritization. You can do your brownfields reuse planning. For a multipurpose grant, you have to do at least 1 redevelopment plan. For a site, you have to also do at least 1 cleanup. And brownfields assessment and investigation. Of course, you can do your phase 1 and phase 2s. And then I wrote it as supports brownfields marketing. I mean, you can probably do a little bit of direct marketing activities with your brownfield site, but at least it at least supports the action item in that a lot of the information that you gather throughout the application process, through the assessment process and your planning processes informs and helps you develop your marketing plan and your marketing strategies for these sites. So it really covers all four in one way or another as far as sustainable Jersey actions. The next grant that's available is the Brownfield Assessment Grants. Now, there are three different types of assessment grants. As municipalities, which I'm assuming most of you are, you would only be concerned with two of them. That would be your assessment community-wide grant, your assessment coalition grant. Those basically what you do is you target, you have a target area. It's not just for a single site. You would have hopefully numerous sites identified within that area that you're going to identify and assess. For these grants, you'll see that the last one I have listed there is the assessment grant for states and tribes. This is basically for states and tribes, and it's a much larger grant. That's why this, if you look at the availability and funding, it's up to $2 million for this grant. That's because of the assessment grant for state and tribal. It's a 4-year performance period for assessment community-wide and assessment coalitions. It's a 5-year for the state and tribal. So similar to the multi-purpose grant, although you can't do cleanup with this grant, you can do, you can do brownfields inventory, you can do brownfield site prioritization, you can do community involvement activities, you can do your site planning or reuse planning, you can assess properties, and you can do cleanup planning for brownfield sites as well. So again, if you look at the eligible sustainable Jersey actions, it basically on some level incorporates all four of them. And then lastly, you have brownfield cleanup grants. So this is, they do exactly, are for exactly what they say. They're to actually clean up remediation activities on brownfield sites that are owned by the applicant. You can get up to $5 million in funding for these grants. They're doing it in increments of $500,000, $1 million, and then up to $5 million. Or I'm sorry, $500,000 to $2 million to $5 million. It's a 4-year performance period, and again, most of what you do for the sustainable Jersey actions is prior to this remediation. So even though you can't, none of the actions really can be done under this grant because this is focused primarily on remediation, it does support your brownfields reuse planning, and it does support your brownfields marketing, again, for all the reasons I stated earlier. It provides you a lot of data, information that you can develop your reuse plan. Hopefully it's been done prior to you coming in for a cleanup grant, and then you have your, it supports your marketing efforts and your marketing plan. So I just put this table up just to give everybody an idea of the order of magnitude of the funding that's going to come out, that has come out for fiscal year 2024. Last year, this year, and the next 3 years are going to be funding for brownfields through EPA is going to be at historic levels. You can see the breakdown of how these are going to be divvied out, how many they're estimating on awarding, and it also tells you where the funding is coming from, whether it's from the bipartisan infrastructure law or if it's just their regular appropriated brownfields funds. The other thing to mention that's really important here is with the grants that require like multi-purpose grants, as well as cleanup, there is no cost share. They've all been waived for these grants because of the high amount of monies. I guess it was anticipated by EPA that most entities would not be able to meet that cost share percentage, so they've waived it, which is awesome. So again, eligible entities for these grants, it can be a regional council that's established under a governmental authority, group of general purpose units of local government that are established under federal, state, or local law. That might be a council of governments as well, that function as a single legal entity with authority to enter into binding agreements with the federal government. Land banks, what's changed with their eligibility this year is that if they were created as an agency or an instrumentality of the state, they are eligible for these grants. If they are independent nonprofit land banks, then they are not eligible for EPA funding through this program. 501c6 organizations can only apply for cleanup grants. And if you're a 501c4 organization and you lobby the federal government, you are not eligible. So the EPA Brownfields grant solicitation cycle takes about, it's just under a year from start to finish. So the request for applications come out in the fall. This year they came out September 21st. They are due into EPA by November 13th. So I believe it's just under 6 weeks. Then what happens is EPA is going to take a look, evaluate all of the grant applications that they receive, and then they're going to make their selection, and they make that announcement in the spring. The past couple of years, it's been in May. And then you would do a few things with EPA as far as developing your work program, and then, or your work plan, and then the funding once that's agreed upon and signed off by EPA, then you get the funding becomes available to the grantees, and that's typically in late summer. So again, just about a year from start to finish. I put this chart up just so you can understand it again in the links that I put in the comments portion of the webinar, of the workshop webinar. You can go and check out these tables if you'd like. It's basically giving you the eligibility for new applicants that are looking to come in for multiple applications. So I won't go through all of it. You can easily read it, and and again, we're going to make this presentation available on our website, so you'll be able to download it there as well. And then this is their chart for if you're an existing grantee. You basically, you look at the left, what you're looking to, what you have, and then you look to the right on what you want to apply for, and then it's going to tell you whether or not you can, you're eligible to apply for it in this solicitation cycle. Again, this will be up on our website. And here's the slide that I mentioned earlier that contains all of the resources that you can have through EPA. If you go to the site, and the EPA has really gone to great lengths. They've done a great job this year. They've done it in previous years, but this year they've really put up a lot of materials. They have not only the webinars from the past 2 days up here that go over the narrative criteria, they have like little instructional pre-recorded webinar modules that go more into the details of each of the criteria. As well, whether it's threshold criteria, your narrative page that you would fill out for this, and your narrative application as well. So all these sites, again, are in the comments box on the screen. So now we're going to get to the grant writing tips and the common mistakes that people basically, have. We've, like I said, we've reviewed hundreds of these over the years, so we've gotten pretty good at picking up what seem to be these common hangups for people. So EPA's grants, all of them are broken into 4 sections of criteria. The first one is project area description and plans for revitalization. Second one is community need and community engagement. The third one is task descriptions, cost estimates, and measuring progress. And then fourth is the programmatic capability and past performance. So if you look at these ranking criteria, the first 2, that's really the essay contest portion of this application. It's where you can be a little bit more creative. It's where you tell your compelling story. The last 2 sections are more pro forma in nature. They basically ask you the question and you provide them with the answer. So just a quick overview, and again, this has been covered by EPA, of some of the narrative updates for this fiscal year. Every year, EPA reviews the guidelines, and they'll make subtle changes. They haven't done an overhaul in quite some time. I believe the last time was 5 years ago. So they just kind of tweak things here and there. So I'll quickly go over that again just to kind of get it stuck in everybody's head, so you remember this if you do decide to apply for a grant. In the grant application where you include your plan to identify additional brownfield sites, they moved it from criterion 3 up to criterion 1. It's not applicable to cleanup grants. It's going to be for your assessment and multi-purpose only. Under criterion 1, the outcomes and benefits of reuse strategy You have to talk about how your project will improve local climate and adaptation/mitigation capacity and resilience to protect residents and community investments. That's been added. There's another addition in criterion 1 under resources needed for site reuse. What they did was they consolidated for clarity, and what they did was they dropped this section from 10 to 5 points. And again, it's not applicable to cleanup grants. It's basically the same amount of the same information requested. It's just kind of how they arranged it. I think it's a little bit easier to answer, and it's clear the way they rewrote it. In criterion 2, you have threats to sensitive populations. This year's new is that applicants are encouraged to use CGEST to identify disadvantaged census tracts. CGEST is basically a tool that will help you identify these disadvantaged census tracts under that criterion. If you can include them and they are listed in CGEST as disadvantaged, that's great. If not, the maximum amount you would be able to be awarded in that section is only 2 points. And that doesn't sound like, doesn't sound like a major thing, but you have to remember that these grants are awarded and not awarded on, you miss it by maybe 1 or 2 points. That's how close it is. It's a very competitive program, so everything counts as far as points. Also under criterion 2, environmental justice, they separated it into 2 5-point criteria, and it includes modified language that includes minimizing displacement, previously included in section 1B 2, which outcomes and benefits of reuse strategy. For part A of the criteria, other than a tribal entity, if a priority site is not, again, this is what I mentioned earlier, is not in a disadvantaged census tract, then you can only earn that maximum of 2 points. Under criterion 3, cost estimates, changes it includes additional details in determining costs to include the construction line included in the cleanup and multipurpose grant guidelines. Just to make this a little bit more understandable, what they did was, because in a multipurpose grant and maybe in a cleanup grant, you may not be completely sure of what the construction costs related to remediation are going to be. So you would include them in a separate line item in your budget table. That's all that's saying. Under criterion 4, acquiring additional resources, you need to show the degree to which you would be able to promote strong labor practices. And then the last change was that no COVID flexibility is contained in this year's grant guidelines. All the last 2 or 3, you had to account for how you were going to deal with COVID as far as community engagement and moving your project forward. All of that's been removed from the grant guidelines, and it's not required in the applications. So getting to the first section, and now we'll talk a little bit more now about tips and some of the common mistakes. So the first criteria is project area description and plans for revitalization. What you have to do here, this is the part of the application where you set the stage for the rest of your narrative in this criterion. You want to develop the most compelling story that you can. You want to paint your community in the most impoverished light possible. I know that's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people want to focus on the successes that you've had, and that's great, but you want to, for the benefit of the reviewer, you want to show them the worst case scenario for your community as possible. And that helps them, understand the need for this grant. Secondly, competitive applicants will have a project that aligns with you want to have a project that aligns with existing community revitalization efforts. So you want to make sure that all the planning that's being done or has been done or is going to be done is consistent with the project that or projects or sites that you're moving forward in this application. They have to be there has to be a correlation between the two. You also want to clearly define your target area or focus areas. Your target area basically is the larger area that your grant would be, you would be able to expend grant monies in. So for community-wide assessment grants, you may initially in your application name 3 sites. 2 of those sites may fall through. You're going to want to look at sites, within that larger target area and hopefully within your focus areas. The focus area would be what's located within your target area. So for the grant purposes, target area, you can spend your money and for any brownfield sites in your target area. For your focus area, that's what you're going to is located within your target area that you're going to emphasize in your grant application. So, if you're a county, for example, your target area may be the entire boundaries of the county, but the focus areas may be 2 or 3 towns within the county that you're primarily going to focus on. But again, that money is not just restricted being used in the focus areas, it can be used in the target area. Some of the things you want to make sure that you include, that whatever those areas are defined as, you want to define them do your best to define them to the best, your best of your abilities. Keep in mind that your grant application reviewers are probably not going to be familiar with your town or your community. So the more detailed those boundaries are described, the better. And of course, you make sure that they're going to include the brownfield sites that you're going to be targeting. And you want to make sure, again, back to the new criterion, where you want to make sure that your area includes disadvantaged census tracts as per CGEST. You also want to demonstrate in this section that you have plans to get from A to Z to assure success of your project. EPA does not want projects just falling out of the sky. They want to know that they were developed and being moved forward through a comprehensive planning practices. Some more for criterion 1, some more tips and common mistakes. You describe how your project's going to improve climate adaptation, mitigation capacity, and resiliency to protect residents and community investments. Again, I highlighted this. This is actually new in the criteria, so you have to address that. You want to include community investments. So you want to talk about, don't just get site-centric, which is what happens a lot of times. People just focus on the brownfield site itself. You want to talk about any improvements or investments your community's made in the surrounding area. That may be streetscape improvements. It could be utility upgrades. Maybe it's you're going to designate it, or you have designated a business improvement district, things of that nature. You also want to be clear on your leveraged resources. You want to make sure that you distinguish between what's committed versus what you anticipate. So, and again, this can easily be done in a table. Use tables whenever you can, because they help save you space and they get the point across. You also want to list existing infrastructure for your site. So is there water, sewer, gas, and electric service to the site? Is there a good transportation network that serves the site? Is there high-speed internet in the area? All this is extremely important, that you understand what's there so that you know what and can talk about what upgrades that you're going to need or will be required to meet your project goals. So moving on to the second criteria, which is community need and community engagement. Here, you basically want to quantify your impacts for the community need whenever possible. So what I mean by that is, don't just say that, okay, well, we have a high cancer rate, high infant mortality, high, a large population of pregnant women or children or elderly that are vulnerable populations. You want to make sure that you go and do the research and find the data, the census data or the health data that supports that. Just don't make the statement. You want to show your community, again, I mentioned this earlier, in its most impoverished light possible. You want to include data from EPA's EJ screen tool, as well as Enviro Atlas, and again, CGEST to establish the community's characteristics and need. And if you're not familiar with CGEST, is basically stands for Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, and it was developed by the Council on Environmental Quality, just so you're familiar with what the acronyms I've listed mean. You want to describe your community's engagement plan, even if it's ongoing. So when you go and put together your application, hopefully at some point there's been some kind of community engagement, or at least a council meeting. Some kind of engagement has occurred that has kind of moved this application forward or agreed that they support it. So you want to make sure that you not only list what you've done to date, but you have to list, moving forward through the application, how you're going to engage the community. And this is really important. You don't want to just, a lot of people do this in community engagement with the mindset of let's just do it because it's required. You want this to be meaningful. You want to make sure that you're reaching out to the proper stakeholders, and you want to make sure that you acknowledge their input and feedback and show them that they are a part of this larger process. Very important. You want to make sure that you discuss how the input from the community, again, is an engagement plan will be meaningfully incorporated into the project. That's going to be something that you have to specifically list in your application, so make sure you do it. Again, continue for criterion 2 is going to be describe how your grant's going to address or facilitate the identification and reduction of threats to health or welfare of your vulnerable populations. So what that means is in the sections where it asks what are the health issues for your community, not only do you list them, you have to talk at the end of those sections on how exactly this project is going to reduce those threats. You want to select meaningful partners with meaningful roles as far as who you identify as your partners and stakeholders. You want people that can make decisions. You want people that can help promote the project, help garner support for the project. It's really quality over quantity here. You don't want to just list a bunch of people or organizations because you think it's going to look good on your application. It needs to be meaningful, that they're going to have a key role in this process. And then you have to address the lack of health data if that's the case. So in many rural areas throughout the region, census data or health data in particular may not be available. You do the best you can, you find what you can, but if there is a lack of data, explain that in the application. Just don't leave it blank or move past it thinking that they're going to understand that there isn't data. Let the reviewer know attempts were made, data doesn't exist. Make that statement, and then it'll help you as far as the points that are assessed to you. So now moving on to criterion 3, which is task descriptions, cost estimates, and measuring progress. Here you want to show a generalized timeline of how the work will be done in the grant performance period. Again, EPA wants to see that you have a good handle on what it's going to take to get this and take this project through to fruition and completion. You want to show how how you're going to easily identify when that project is or on schedule, and you're going to have to describe the corrective action. So you want to make sure that you address that clearly in this section. You want, if there's a need to you don't want to just back into cost. You need to substantiate the figures for the amount of money that you're asking for in your budget. So what don't back into costs, show the detail on how the figures that you're submitting have been arrived at in the grant application and in this section. You want to check your math. I know that sounds silly, but you wouldn't believe how many grant applications we get in where the math just doesn't add up, literally. So make sure that you take the time, have somebody else get a new set of eyes on all your math and have that checked. You want to make sure that your budget correlates to your tasks. So a lot of people, when they put their grant application together, they'll put their budget table together, and then they'll list under each task the numbers that were put in the budget for that particular task, just to make it easier for the reviewer. And that's a great idea. But again, make sure that those numbers are the same and that they correlate, because sometimes you have different people writing a grant application, somebody changes the table and they don't go back and change the task. So make sure all that adds up. And then you have to understand what outputs are versus outcomes. So in these grant applications, when they ask you for outputs, they're asking you for the number of public meetings you're going to have, number of sites you're going to do phase 1s on, number of phase 2s, things of that nature. Outcomes are more what is the health benefits for the community after this project is completed? What are the economic benefits? Think more in long terms, and outcomes sometimes are a little harder to measure, but that's the difference between the two, and make sure that you understand that and you list that information accordingly. And then last, we have programmatic capability and past performance. And this is basically the section where you toot your horn and you let them know how great you are and that you have experience. And even if you don't have the appropriate experience, you have experience that's going to make them feel confident that you'll be able to take this project through to completion. So you want to clearly describe the project management structure and how it's going to function. That's particularly going to be particularly important if you have a coalition grant where you have a lot of different entities kind of leading the charge on a project. You want to make sure that you read the and or in the evaluation criteria. So what that means is, especially at the end where they're going to ask you, have you ever had an EPA Brownfields grant? If not, then you go to the next and or you've had a federal level grant or something of substantial significant size that's comparable. Make sure that you go through all that. You can't just not answer because you never had an EPA Brownfields grant. Keep following the guidelines down until you get to where you have you can answer that question. Don't skip it. Again, you want to use tables to summarize information where appropriate. It does help save space. And then, you don't want to be modest, again, about your experience. You want to make sure that, again, you toot your horn, but you don't want to give more than 3 examples. That's what they're restricting you to. So you don't want to, again, overburden your reviewer. A happy reviewer is a generous reviewer. So make sure that you keep it within the quantity they're asking. And again, you want to address all the criteria. And again, if you don't have a history, then say that for a neutral score of 80 points. If you don't respond, again, you'll get 0 points. So I take the 8 over 0 any day. So some general application tips, and the first one is, and this is the number one piece of advice that we give that you're going to hear from EPA, follow the directions. So basically read the entire guidelines from start to finish. It'll give you a good understanding of what this bigger picture is supposed to look like. And a lot of the, EPA's gone to great lengths to make these as understandable as possible. So just, it's just a question of reading through them once or twice, getting a good handle on what they're asking for. You need to decide what your story is. We have a saying here: ordinary doesn't get funded. You need to come up with a story and a compelling story that kind of separates you from the herd. So you want to make sure that you put some effort into and thought into that. You want to make sure that your project outcomes match your community needs. So what I mean by that is there's a lot, we've seen applications come in where they've engaged the community, and a lot of the community needs were that we need affordable housing. And then at the end of when they get to the end of the project on what the goal is for this project, they're going to do open space. Well, those don't match. You have to make sure that the needs match the outcomes. You want to write as though your reader knows nothing about your community, because again, they probably don't. So be as descriptive as you can, as concise as you can. You want to look at past successful applications. On our website, if you go to NJIT tab, not NJIT, you want to do njit.edu/tab, the web URL that I gave you earlier on that slide, and go to our resources page, and on there you will see a list of past successful grant applications. We have cleanup grants, revolving loan fund grants, multi-purpose grants, assessment grants, all of them. Take a look at them and you'll get an idea on what this needs to look like. It's extremely helpful to do that. You can also go to KSU's, Kansas State University has, they're another tab provider that handles the Midwest portion of the country. They've developed a product called Tab EZ. Tab EZ is essentially a program where you go online and you can fill out each section. It kind of does it in a little, in my opinion, it breaks it out, makes it easier to make sure that you're filling out and providing all the information you need. But at the end of the day, I do suggest that you download it and then read it as a narrative and not just a blocked out application. You want to be kind to your reviewers. You want to minimize the use of acronyms. May not know what a lot of them are. As well as technical and organizational jargon. They may not be familiar with any of that. So make sure that you make it as easy on them as possible. And you want to keep extraneous stuff out. So, because it's going to distract from your story. There's no graphics, no photos. You can use tables, use them wisely to save space. But don't add anything else. Anything that goes beyond the page limits for these will just be redacted from the application and thrown in the garbage can. They won't look at it. So keep that in mind. It's very important. You don't want to rely on past successes. You want, a lot of people have gone through this process before. They're really good at developing brownfields, and that's great. And that's what you want to be able to list in criterion 4 as far as past experience. But as far as the project that you're looking at, you want to keep it forward focused. You want to tell them what the issues are and how your project is going to resolve them. And again, keep it forward focused and on topic. You want to read and evaluate any proposal written by a consultant. In our experience, a lot of consultants write a lot of these grant applications, and that's fine. But we want you to make sure that you don't just take it from them and then submit it. Take a look at it. Make sure that the message is clear. Make sure the message is consistent with what your community wants, and make sure it's filled out correctly. You don't want to use hyperlinks in your application. I know some people I've seen do that. Come and check this. We have a high cancer rate. Here's the hyperlink. Go take a look at it. The reviewer's not going to hit a hyperlink and go and take a look at it. First off, they get a hard copy to review. So you basically, you can use hyperlinks only to source data that you have used. So if it's in the footer under sourcing, that's fine. Don't do it expecting a reviewer to go to that site and look at the information. You want to address all the criteria. If it doesn't apply, say so and explain why. So there may be a question that's asked of you. Your community just doesn't have any information or hasn't done anything that explain why. Don't just leave it blank. You want to review the associated grant frequently asked questions. I provided the link in on the slide as well as in the comments. Chances are any issues or anything that you're getting hung up on somebody else has in the past, those FAQs are great. Go take a look at them and you'll probably get your answer. If you don't get your answer, you can always reach out to NJIT tab. Now that the guidelines are out, EPA goes kind of quiet. The only thing that they're able to answer are things as far as eligibility and clarification of a criterion. They can't help you, give you any advice on how you should fill this out. We can do that. But again, between us and the FAQs, you should be okay. We also provide grant critiques for free, and you're always welcome to submit it to us for that service as well. You want to write your proposal from the evaluation criteria section of the guidelines versus the ranking criteria. So what I mean by that is that when you open up the guidelines, you're going to see a narrative criteria, and then you're going to see ranking criteria. And the narrative criteria, I always kind of think of that kind of gives you the spirit of what they're looking for in that section. But the ranking criteria, that's exactly what the EPA reviewer is going to have open in front of them when they read your application and score it. So when you review yours, make sure that that's the criteria you're looking at. And you ask yourself, did I answer that question to get these points? That will help you immensely in coming up and developing a very competitive application. You want to use the outline provided in the guidelines. Don't get creative. There's 4 major sections of criterion. Then there's subsections of criterion. Use the outline numbering and the titles that are provided to you in the guidelines. This way the reviewer can immediately know what they're looking at, where to find the information. And they're, again, happy means more points. You want to make sure that your subcontractors that you list have been selected according to the EPA requirements. Those are, again, you don't have to list your subcontractors, but if you do, you want to make sure that the statement is made that you did select them according to the requirements, the EPA requirements. If you don't name them, you don't have to make that statement, but if you do hire subcontractors, you still have to hire them according to EPA requirements. So that's the overview of basically, that's our tips and our common pitfalls. So just for those of you that may not be familiar with the TAB program, we're the Technical Assistance program. We're funded by US EPA through a cooperative agreement, and we're intended to serve as an independent resource to communities and nonprofits attempting to clean up and reclaim brownfield sites. Because we have that cooperative agreement with EPA, all the assistance we provide is 100% free of charge. No charge to you, not at the end, not at the beginning. Free. It is the free lunch. Take advantage of it. We do serve Region 2. We also serve Region 4. NJIT TAB has been a TAB provider since 2008, so we have lots of experience in this, and we are, hopefully you'll take advantage of us as a resource. So as you go through this, again, you're going to have all sorts of questions, whether it be through writing this grant, or if you win the grant, you're going to move through the process and you're going to have questions along the way. That's what we're here for. Just reach out to us and we'll do our best to get you the answers to your questions. We are, who is this leadership team? We're planners, we're engineers, we're environmental scientists and social scientists. And again, we've helped hundreds of communities from Maine down to the Caribbean and as far west as Mississippi. So we provide our assistance through three components. We basically have our resource center, which we're now calling our Brownfields Academy. That is basically our website where we couch all of our archived information, resources on grant writing, archived webinars, archived workshops, presentation material, appropriate contacts, funding resources, so on and so forth. Everything's there. We've really spent a lot of time making it user-friendly, so just go and peruse the site. I gave you the URL again earlier on the slide. So that's the first component. Our second component is our Brownfield educational forums, which is essentially what we're doing here today. It can be a virtual workshop, a webinar, a Brownfields boot camp. It can be a seminar. We speak at conferences all across the country. So basically anything educational related. And then the third and last part is our one-on-one technical assistance. This is kind of the hallmark of our TAB program, where we actually roll up our sleeves and get in the trenches with communities. This is where we can work with you to help you come up with a plan moving your brownfields project forward. We can help you develop some market strategies. We can help you develop community engagement plans. We can come out and educate your community. Basically anything brownfields related that you wouldn't technically hire a consultant to do, we can do. So we don't go out, we don't take samples, we're not going to analyze samples, but if you get a report, a phase 1 or a phase 2, and you're not sure what it's saying, we can review it for free and put it into layman's terms so that you can understand it. One of the other things that we do, and I mentioned it earlier, is we do free EPA grant critiques. So this year, if you want to critique, if you do apply and you want us to critique your grant prior, the deadline for submission to us is October 31st. We're not trying to be tough on you. We know the submission date isn't to the 13th, but we want enough time to take a look at your grant, give you comments, and then give you time to incorporate them into your application. So you can reach out to us anytime. So here's just a quick, this is our resource center, which I covered, our forums, and then again, the one-on-one technical assistance. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll turn my camera back on. Hopefully Samantha McGraw is here she's here. She's going to be able to answer any questions you might have regarding Sustainable Jersey and their action items. So I don't see any questions and answers. I couldn't have done that great a job. So please put them into the Q&A pane and we'll do our best to answer them. I'll give you a minute or two. Just so, one other thing while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, again, if you do go to those EPA websites, there is all the information that you do need is listed there. The training modules, the guidelines, the grant presentation overviews is all listed there, easy to find. I do suggest you take advantage of it. And again, if you're looking at something that you're not comfortable with, you don't understand, or you have questions, you can always reach out to us. It can be through either email or you can do it by phone. So let's see. Let me see if there's any in the chat. Okay, Samantha, I unmuted you. I see that you.
Thanks, Sean.
Hi, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. We don't have any questions at this point. Again, somebody did ask if the PowerPoint is going to be made available. Yes, it'll be put up on our NJIT tab website under resources. So if you just type in NJIT tab, it'll take you right to our website.
Yeah, that's great. And Sean, I just wanted to thank you so much for hosting this webinar today. I think the connections to the Sustainable Jersey actions were great, and hopefully it really encourages some of the attendees today to go for a grant.
Yeah, I hope so. It's free money. I know it. And again, these are historic, funding times. And this is, you're going to have this year and then 3 more at these levels. Hopefully it's going to be maintained at these levels over the next 3. But, the monies that EPA is putting out for brownfields is just unbelievable. These past 2 years, the numbers are I mean, look at it in these terms. It's usually 500,000 or $400,000 for an assessment grant, or I'm sorry, 200,000 for an assessment grant, and now you're up to 5 million. So that's quite a jump. So we don't have seeing no questions. What I'll do is I'll close out the webinar. I want to thank everybody. I want again thank you, Samantha. Thank you for Sustainable Jersey for hosting this event. I hope you found it useful, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time to spend the workshop with us. And if you have any questions, again, just reach out. Thank you.